Excuse me, how much longer until I'm called? We called you just now. What? Startled by the receptionist's words, I hurried into the examination room, and there was my familiar husband. Why are you here? The blood drained from John's face. In his panic, he tried to kick me out of the room. Immediately after, an unbelievable scene came into my view. My name is Christy Thomas, 27 years old. I was raised as the older of two sisters. I work in corporate office management. 3 years ago, I got married and now live with my husband, John. We met in college, worked at the same part-time job, dated for 4 years, and got married. Even now, we maintain a relationship where we can talk about anything, just like friends. By the way, I'm currently 7 weeks pregnant. We wanted a child right after we got married, but it didn't happen easily. And after 2 years of fertility treatment, a new life is finally growing inside me. When I went to the OB-GYN alone, the gestational sac, which is the baby's growing room, was already visible, and the ultrasound photo even showed the tiny fetus. I haven't told John about the pregnancy yet. I wanted to surprise him. On the way back from the OB-GYN, I bought a cake and stopped at a supermarket to get ingredients for his favorite food. When I got home, I started cooking right away. A few hours later, John, who came home saying, "I'm home," widened his eyes when he saw the food on the table. "Wow, it's so luxurious today. There's even my favorite, beef stew." That's right. I thought we should have a party today. Huh? A party? Why all of a sudden? Actually, I went to the hospital today. Hospital? I handed the ultrasound photo I took out of my bag to John, who was looking anxious. Looking at it, he raised his face forcefully and stared at me. "Christy, is this... really? John, we're becoming parents. Really? We're going to be parents?" "Yes, it's true. Our baby has finally come to us." I'm just so surprised. I'm lost for words. I know, it doesn't feel real, does it? But it's true. Our baby is really growing inside me. Growing steadily. Oh my God. Everything seems to be growing fine. Together, John, we're finally becoming parents. With every word I say, the reality of it slowly sinks in. Tears start flowing from my eyes, and before I know it, I can't stop them. John must be really happy too. He hugs me tight, his eyes also brimming with tears. Over and over again, he says, "Thank you," with a grateful smile on his face. Ever since that day, John has been taking on even more of the household chores than before. We used to share the housework, but now he's taken over cleaning the bathroom because it's too dangerous for me. He's also been proactive about grocery shopping for heavy items like rice and water. But that's not all. In order to reduce my burden even a little bit, he started making appointments for my prenatal checkups on his own. He's been asking about my schedule and making my checkup appointments for me, since I'm not so good with using the internet. I've been experiencing mild morning sickness, but not enough to keep me bedridden, so I've continued to work as usual. When I get home, I make dinner and wait for John to come back. He's been working overtime a lot since about a year ago, and usually doesn't get home until after 9 p.m. This night, though, he didn't come home even when it was past 10 p.m. Whenever it gets past 9 p.m., he always calls, but tonight, there's no word from him. I try reaching out to him, but there's no response, so I wait for him anxiously. Then, Just past 11 p.m., I hear the sound of the front door opening. I rushed over to greet him. "John, welcome home! I was worried because you didn't contact me." Sorry. Something came up. But you weren't supposed to have overtime today, right? Did something happen? No. Just got some unexpected work. His eyes are clearly avoiding mine. Something seems off about how he's speaking. An uneasy premonition gripped me, and I confronted him right away. "John, are you hiding something?" What are you talking about? I'm not hiding anything." "Then why won't you look me in the eye? If you have nothing to hide, you should be able to tell me where you were and what you were doing, right?" I told you! I got caught up with an unexpected job. Some screw-up by a junior. I had to step in and handle it. But even if that was the case, couldn't you have sent me a message like you usually do? I texted you several times. I even called you, didn't I? Well, it couldn't be helped. I was busy. I didn't have time to answer your calls. John, who was usually so composed, raised his voice and glared at me. This was the first time I had ever seen him like this, and it startled me. He continued ranting, panting, and out of breath. "After all I do, working late and then coming home to be doubted? What nerve! Is it fun for you, making a fool out of people like this?" What are you talking about? I'm not making a fool out of you. I'm just asking why you were late. I said it was because of overtime, didn't I? What more do you want? It's not about what I want or don't want. You didn't contact me like you usually do. That's why I thought it was strange. Oh, enough. You're being so stubborn. Is it because you're pregnant that you're having these intense delusions? What? Listen, Christy, when the time comes for you to give birth, you won't be able to work. And then who do you think is going to support us? Me, right? If you want to be supported, stop interfering in my work. John then left, throwing off his suit and going straight into the bath, after which he shut himself in our bedroom. What was left in the living room was the untouched dinner I had prepared. In front of the untouched side dishes, I was overwhelmed by indescribable emotions. Why? Why would he say things like that? All I did was point out that something felt off. To call it delusions? That's too harsh. Since that day, John began treating me coldly. It became normal for him to come home in the early hours of the morning, and the days when he would come home by 9 p.m., as he used to, became rare. In the midst of all this uncertainty, my pregnancy continued. John, who used to help out with anything and everything, no longer did any household chores, leaving it all to me. The strain of doing the housework while being careful not to exert too much force on my stomach gradually wore me down. Finally, unable to handle everything alone, I called my younger sister Karen. "Hey, Karen. Oh, sis! Long time no see. What's up?" "Well, I had a bit of a spat with John." "Oh, really? You two are just like the saying, the more you argue, the better you get along, huh?" Karen, my sister, who's 3 years younger than me, is working in the fashion industry. We've always been referred to as two peas in a pod, and we're very close. During my dating days with John, she was my go-to for advice. She's an irreplaceable part of my life. That day, too, she listened to me for almost an hour before I ended the call. Opening up to her helped me feel a bit better. I was in the 17th week of my pregnancy, and my belly was starting to show. Entering the stable period, I felt fine, so I headed to work as usual. After my lunch break, just as I was about to start my afternoon tasks, something happened. I felt a sudden, unfamiliar twinge in my belly. What was that? The pain seemed to linger. In that moment, I thought about the safety of my child. Feeling anxious, I left work early and rushed to the women's clinic I usually visit. Normally, John would make an appointment for me, but today was unexpected, and I didn't have one. It looked like I'd have to wait a while for a checkup, but the thought of going home like this filled me with anxiety. Ready for a long wait, I explained the situation to the reception staff. "Excuse me, I'm Christy Thomas, and I've been having some mild abdominal pain for a while." "Thomas, please, wait a moment." I didn't have an appointment because it was unexpected today." "Oh, here you are." "Huh? You're Christy Thomas, right? 17 weeks pregnant? We have an appointment for you. Please, wait over there." Okay." As instructed, I took a seat on the waiting room sofa. I took out my planner from my bag to check, but there was no appointment scheduled for today. Since that incident, things have been awkward between John and me, but he's still been making my medical appointments as usual. That said, my next appointment isn't until later. It's definitely not today. Feeling somewhat uneasy, I decided to just wait until they called me. About an hour passed when I was hit by the stomachache again. I stood up and headed to the restroom. And yet, my turn still hadn't come. Even for a busy clinic, I should have been called by now. Could it be that I didn't really have an appointment? I went back to the reception desk and asked a different staff member. "Excuse me, do you know how much longer it will be until I'm called? May I have your name, please?" "It's Thomas. Christy Thomas. I've been waiting for over an hour." "Thomas. Oh. Is there a problem?" "Well, you were called just now." "What?" "You should have been called into consultation room number 3. I thanked the staff and quickly headed to the consultation room. A sign on the door of room number 3 read, "In consultation." In consultation? I was supposed to be called, so why? Could someone else have mistakenly entered? In a split second, I knocked on the door of consultation room number 3. A nurse opened the door and asked, "Can I help you?" I'm Christy Thomas. I had to use the restroom earlier, and..." "Christy Thomas?" "The receptionist said I was already called, but the sign said in consultation, so I thought maybe someone else had gone in." "Wait, you're Christy Thomas? But she's already inside." "What?" No matter how I thought about it, something was off. Convinced of this, I pushed past the nurse and forced my way into the examination room. That's when it happened. An unbelievable sight met my eyes. "Why are you here?" There, in the room, was none other than my husband, John. The moment he saw me, he started speaking in a flustered manner. Christy, what are you doing here?" "That's what I was going to ask. Why are you here?" Could it be, John? Did you make the appointment under my name? But why?" "Just get out, for now!" John tried to forcefully push me out of the room. However, given this obviously strange situation, I couldn't just back down. "John, explain this to me. Why are you here right now?" I'll explain later. So, for now, I want an explanation now. You can't expect me to just accept this, can you? I'm begging you. Just leave for now." While I was arguing with John, the doctor, probably returning from an internal exam, came back, looking puzzled. "Wait, Christy, huh?" Seeing me, the doctor's eyes widened. Doctor, I just got here. Huh? Then who did I just examine? Just as he said that, the door to the exam room opened. Coming out of the room was none other than my sister, Karen. Oh, Karen? I had absolutely no idea what was going on anymore. Why is Karen here? Well... My frustration grew at Karen's hesitations. I confronted her. Why is the appointment under my name? And why did you come out of the examination room? Then the doctor, who had been listening, opened his mouth. Mrs. Thomas, I apologize for not realizing it was not you. She was wearing a mask, so I couldn't tell. But I thought it was strange. You're supposed to be 17 weeks pregnant, but the baby was too small. It was no wonder the doctor didn't realize. My sister and I look so much alike, and she was wearing a mask. Doctor, the person you just examined is my sister, and that man there is my husband. What? So, you mean the father of the baby I just examined is... The doctor's sharp gaze locked onto John. I could see the color draining from his face. And at that moment, I finally understood everything. John? Karen? I need an explanation. From the beginning. Whether they had given up or not, they slowly started to speak. According to them, they had been in a relationship for about a year. While I was struggling to get pregnant and undergoing fertility treatments, they claimed temptation got the better of them. Then my pregnancy was confirmed. At first, they were purely happy, but shortly after, Karen's pregnancy was also confirmed. Karen asked John to accompany her to the hospital because she was scared, and John, in his usual carelessness, mistakenly booked the appointment under my account. He noticed this just before we arrived at the hospital, panicked, pretended to forget the insurance card, and completed the check-in. While I was in the restroom, the staff at the front desk's shift changed. As soon as they called the name for the appointment, Karen must have slipped into the examination room without running into me. The doctor initially didn't realize it was Karen, since she was wearing a mask. But of course, during the examination, it became clear she wasn't me. And as the doctor was wondering about this, the real Christy arrived at the examination room. After that, I regained my composure and had my own checkup. The abdominal pain was diagnosed as transient, and there was no problem with my baby. I took my husband and sister and headed straight for our parents' house. I also contacted John's parents and asked them to come to the house. Once everyone was gathered, I explained to them the whole situation. Of course you're going to take responsibility, right? I asked. Stammering, my husband responded, Responsibility? Of course! I will continue to be with you, Christy. Huh? What are you talking about? We're obviously getting a divorce. But you just mentioned responsibility. The responsibility I'm talking about is alimony. I'm going to make sure you pay, both you and Karen, for what you've done. What? Wait a minute! I never intended to get a divorce. My husband's words sparked anger in my sister, who was standing nearby. What? You said you loved me more! Was that all a lie? Karen grabbed my husband's collar, and they started to argue. Their noisy squabble pushed my anger to its peak. I splashed the tea from the table on both of them, raising my voice as much as possible. Enough is enough! I don't care about your opinions! I'm divorcing John, and I'm cutting ties with Karen. You two just need to pay the alimony. Quietly! Wait, Christy! The one I love is you. Sis? I'm your sister, aren't I? Don't talk about alimony. Shut up! Both of you only say things that suit your purposes. How far do you plan to ridicule me? I will collect the alimony by any means necessary. If it means sending you two to hell, I'll do whatever it takes. If you get it, get out of my sight, you scumbags. At that, both of them began to prostrate themselves in front of me. Please forgive me, Christy. I beg you. Sis, I also beg you. It's too late for their repentance. What they did is unforgivable, and I have absolutely no intention of forgiving them. After that, my husband and I divorced, as expected. I blocked Karen's contact information and cut off all ties with them completely. They were disowned by their families and had to start living on their own. But John's affair was spread to his workplace through his parents, and because of that, he started receiving cold stares from his colleagues. Unable to bear the atmosphere, he continued to be absent from work without notice, and was eventually fired. Karen, on the other hand, was suffering from severe morning sickness, and had already quit her job. Now jobless, whenever they faced each other, they cursed at each other, and led a miserable life. They began living together, but they hadn't gotten married. I think they won't support each other as a married couple in the future. As for me, I moved back to my parents' house and am now leading a pregnant life. I switched my job to remote work and am anxiously waiting for the birth of my child. I might make my child suffer because there's no father. Even so, I intend to love this child with all my heart, in my own way.
Get out! You're no daughter of mine. The one yelling at me with such force that spit flies is my mother. Her face is beet red as she screams, both her hands gripping a knife, its tip pointed at me. You're just a leech who won't even provide for living expenses. Contrary to her claims, I contribute over $3,000 a month to the household, which is more than half of my income. She knows this. I've explained it numerous times, but nothing seems to get through to her now. I've seen her angry before, unwilling to listen, but I never imagined she'd resort to wielding a knife. My priority now is to not get hurt, to not provoke her further, and to gently put some distance between us. Her cold voice reaches me. I wish I never had a parasite like you. I'm Camilla, 29 years old. Thanks to my hard work, I now work as a systems engineer at a well-known major corporation. My journey to this job began with my father's influence. He always loved tinkering with computers. As a child, he was fascinated by machines, and the first time he saw a computer, he was profoundly moved. Back then, I was excited, but the latest computers are amazing. Look, see how thin this one is? Yet the screen is so clear. Smiling, he used to take me, then a young elementary student, to electronics stores. He would show me the latest computer models, explaining what made them special. Watching him happily engaging with computers sparked my own interest. My father, usually a man of few words, would enthusiastically teach me about computers. Eventually, I realized I was more adept at using computers than my peers, leading me to dive deeper into my studies and enroll in a college of science and engineering. During my job search, I naturally gravitated towards a career related to computers. Now I work as a systems engineer at my current company, primarily doing remote work. I enjoy my job and have achieved significant results among my peers. Visiting my parents' house occasionally and talking about work with my father has always been a highlight. Then, one day, my father collapsed. I received a call from my mother and rushed to the hospital. Is Dad okay? He suddenly collapsed, and I immediately called for an ambulance. They ran tests at the hospital, and it seems like a subarachnoid hemorrhage. They said urgent surgery is needed. He's in the operating room right now. I'm worried about what will happen to our lives now. Oh no, Dad. I waited, praying for my family's safety. Hours later, the doctor came out of the operating room to inform us. The surgery was successful, but there might be lasting effects on his limbs. I was just relieved that his life was saved. I felt a momentary relief. My mother said beside me, "What are you going to do about work now? I'm worried whether you can work properly. Without an income, how am I supposed to live?" She was concerned about her own future. It was always like this. My mother always putting herself first before the family. Seeing her like this made me feel even sadder. During his hospitalization, I visited my dad several times. As the doctor said, he had difficulty moving his arms and legs. He tried hard in rehabilitation before discharge, but it seemed some after effects would remain. During his stay, my mother would bring only the bare necessities to the hospital and leave quickly. Dad decided to take early retirement, as commuting to his current job was too challenging in his condition. Living alone was also difficult for him, requiring care, so I discussed this with my mother. Dad can't live alone in his condition, so I hope you can help, Mom. But I wasn't expecting much from her response. "I'm too busy with my own things to care for your father." Her words came out instantly, leaving me disappointed. My mother never prioritized family since I was young, always putting herself first. I believe she loved my father, so I thought she would lend a hand to him in his current state. Yet she refused my request for help. "I understand. Then I'll move in and take care of Dad myself." "That would be a big help. When can you start?" Since my job was mostly remote, I could manage both work and caregiving, as long as I had a computer and an environment suitable for online meetings. Knowing it would be a busy life, juggling work and caregiving, I decided to return home and live with my parents. The day I moved back while packing my things, my mother approached me. "About meals, make sure breakfast is ready by 7 a.m. It'd be good to have grilled fish, natto, or salad, considering health. And keep the trash in small bags so it doesn't smell. Remember to take out the burnable trash on Mondays and Thursdays. And do the cleaning every day. Ah, it's so good you're back." Though she initially said she could take care of herself, my mother quickly changed her attitude and began pushing all household chores onto me. Despite her complaints, I noticed the house was dirty. It seems she never did much housework. As expected, I ended up doing all the housework alone, with my mother not lifting a finger. Moreover, she was often out, living freely as she pleased. My days became incredibly busy with work, caregiving, and now all the household chores. My father, who had lost some weight, apologized. "I'm sorry for causing trouble. You have to work, too." I shook my head slowly, smiling. "Don't apologize, Dad. It's not your fault. I'm glad I came back home. I enjoy talking with you." Hearing this, he seemed slightly relieved. Caring for my father didn't mean he was bedridden or couldn't eat by himself. It was just lending a hand here and there, not too difficult, and I was happy to spend time with him like when I was a child. Meanwhile, my mother, who does nothing, never hesitates to complain. "Camilla, your cooking is kind of bland and simple, isn't it? Isn't it insufficient for Dad's nutrition? For a sick person like him, shouldn't you increase the variety of dishes? What an unfilial daughter." She says this while gobbling up my cooking, which really irks me. However, mentioning Dad made me think seriously. Given his age, he doesn't eat much, but perhaps having more small dishes rather than large ones would be easier for him to eat. Thinking this, I increased the variety, but Mom didn't comment. Instead, a few days later, she said, "There are too many dishes lately. We're old and can't eat so much. Don't you know how to save, even though you've been living alone?" She said this while finishing her meal, so I couldn't help but retort. "You're the one who told me to increase the number of dishes. I did it so Dad wouldn't get tired of the same food, and to stimulate his appetite." Mom then sighed loudly and stood up. "What's with that tone? It's like you're doing it reluctantly because I complained. How ungrateful. It's your attitude, taking every little suggestion as a complaint. That's why you're still unmarried." Expressing her anger with her entire body, she stomped towards the sofa in front of the TV. Of course, she left her dishes on the table. Flopping down on the sofa. "Coffee!" She looked at me and barked. As if I would serve her, while I was clearing the table, she threw a cushion at me from the sofa. "Hey, make the coffee already. You're almost always at home, and you don't even go to work. You talk about caring for Dad. But aren't you just after his retirement money? And you can't even do housework properly. You're so unreasonable." This again? I've switched to remote work, remember? I'm in meetings and working, even when I'm in my room. No matter how I explained, Mom refused to understand remote work. In her mind, I was the daughter who returned home under the guise of caregiving, not contributing to the household expenses and bringing misfortune. It baffles me how Mom thought I was using Dad's retirement money for myself, when I was the only one actually caring for him. In reality, I was the one caring for Dad, earning for our parents' living expenses and doing all the housework. I've been dealing with Mom's whims since childhood, but I've reached my limit. It's unfortunate for Dad, but I can't live with the three of us under one roof. A few days after making this decision, I accompanied Dad to his rehabilitation. He was motivated, and though dramatic improvement was unlikely, we were preventing further decline. As the doctor encouraged us to keep going, we returned home to see Mom leaving the house hastily with a large bag. It was normal for her to be out often and to come back from department stores with big bags, so I didn't think much of it. However, the next day, when I went to go shopping and opened my closet, I realized all my precious bags and accessories were gone. What? Why? They weren't something I wore often, nor had I moved them, so they should be here. Then I remembered Mom's hurried departure the day before and confronted her. "Mom, did you go into my room yesterday?" "Why are you asking all of a sudden? This is my house, and I can go into any room I want." "Then what's in that bag?" Mom was holding a bag from a high-end brand. It was clearly something she had just bought. "So you somehow had the money to buy such a brand item? You're always telling me not to waste money." "Well, you waste money, so I thought I'd get some assurance from you." I frowned, not understanding her words, and she started laughing cheerfully. "You had some nice bags. Even just the bags and accessories sold for a good amount." Shockingly, my mother had sold my accessories without my permission and used the money for her own interests. I couldn't contain my anger. "I can't believe this. Stealing and then selling them? That's worse than a thief. Give them back. Compensate me," I yelled. Mom twisted her face. "Unbelievable. A daughter talking back to her mother. When I was a child, I absolutely obeyed my parents. I worked and cared for my parents. I'm even taking care of your father. All you do is complain without doing anything." She shouted and slammed her fist on the table. "Then why don't you help a little with Dad's care? Mom, do you remember ever caring for him since I came back? Have you prepared his clothes? Or helped him up from a chair? You don't even do that, and you say you're taking care of him? The one being cared for in this house is you." I slammed my hands on the table and glared at her. I knew my mother didn't get along with my paternal grandmother and might have faced harassment, but at least claiming to be caring for my father was something I couldn't accept. Dad had given up on expecting care from Mom. He tried engaging in small talk, bringing up TV shows or stories from friends he met during rehab, but whenever he started talking, she would quickly leave the room. Why could she confidently claim to be caring for him while doing nothing? While I was lost in thought, Mom stayed silent. Slowly lifting her hands from the table, she turned away without a word and walked towards the kitchen. I sighed, thinking she was escaping the conversation again, but she returned unexpectedly quickly. Approaching briskly, she was holding a knife in both hands. "Mom?" Her face was redder than I'd ever seen. shaking with anger as she yelled at me louder than ever before. "Get out of this house! You're just a parasite living here for Dad's retirement money!" At that moment, I realized none of my words had ever reached her. To her, no matter how much I cared for Dad or worked, I was nothing but a pest. "I'll move out as soon as I find a new place." I slowly backed away, saying this while putting distance between us. Then I rushed to my room. I thought I wouldn't feel anything being rejected by such a distant mother, but tears wouldn't stop flowing. Not from sadness, but from intense anger. I immediately started to act. I began preparing to move out that day. A colleague at work had a friend in real estate, so I sought their help and cooperation. In my free time, I packed my belongings into boxes. Finding a new place didn't take long, thanks to my colleague's help. Once I was ready to move, I discussed it with my father. "Dad, can we talk for a minute?"
What's up?
I told my father everything, about how Mom had been treating me.
That's terrible. I had a hunch about Mom's attitude, but since I've been a burden, I couldn't really say much. I'm sorry.
"It's not your fault, Dad."
I've been thinking too. When I was healthy, I was almost entirely burdened with the housework, like cleaning, laundry, and cooking. It was like I was a housekeeper, and she'd always ask for money, so I was struggling too.
Dad continued.
Even now, needing care, it's always you who helps, and Mom never tries to assist. I'm deeply disappointed with her. That's why, actually, I've been considering divorce.
"That must have been hard for you, Dad."
No. Compared to what you've been through, Camilla, it's nothing. Thank you, really.
"I'm just glad I could come back home and be with you. That's what makes me happiest." I meant every word. I wanted to stay with my dad now and in the future. "Dad, I have something to discuss." I had a plan in mind, aware of Dad's feelings towards Mom. I shared it with him. A few days later, we moved out while Mom was away. She always left on Wednesdays for her hula dance class and lunch with friends, returning at 3 p.m. We scheduled the movers for that Wednesday morning, a time when she was guaranteed to be out. As they loaded our belongings onto the truck, I felt a tinge of sadness about leaving this house. I got into a rented car, not alone, but with my dad. We had both agreed to leave Mom behind and live together. In the car, Dad said,
Camilla, are you sure this is okay? You could have been freed from taking care of me.
"Don't say that, Dad. I want to live with you. That's my greatest happiness. Let's do our best together."
Thank you.
The move was finished by early afternoon, and we sat in our new home eating sandwiches we'd bought. "Sorry, it's just sandwiches today. We didn't have much time."
It's nostalgic. I used to eat them often before you came back. I didn't have time to cook because of work. Mom always complained.
Dad laughed. The sandwiches tasted delicious as we chatted about trivial things. While we were settling in, the phone rang. It was Mom. I answered, putting it on speaker so Dad could hear. "Yes?" "Why have you both suddenly disappeared?" I could tell Mom was furious over the phone. "Why are both your and your dad's belongings gone?" "We decided to move out together after consulting. You did tell us to leave, right? Is there a problem? Now you don't have to worry about caregiving or living expenses." "What about my life with Dad? I'm relying on his retirement and pension. Where are you now?" "Why don't you take care of yourself? We're already in our new home. I won't say where, but we bought a high-rise apartment." "Huh? A high-rise apartment is for rich people, right? Stop joking. There's no way you guys could live there." Mom clearly didn't believe us, but it was true. We had moved to a high-rise apartment close to the hospital where Dad was receiving treatment. I think I've told you several times, but I've been continuously working. You always said it was just a little side job. Our company is quite large, and I've been there a long time, entrusted with significant responsibilities. You might not remember, but the $3,000 I've been depositing into the account every month, that was from me. "Wait, That wasn't Dad's pension. I thought the balance was high because of his retirement money. Did Dad ever have an income that could give $3,000 a month? His retirement fund was gone the next month. I saw the card statements. It was all spent on brand bags by you. That's why I was supporting the family. I didn't know that. No one told me anything about it. Realizing explaining further was pointless, I continued. You didn't listen because you didn't want to. I've told you many times, and I heard from Dad. You've been going out to play with friends every day, even while Dad was still working. You complained every day about your oppressive husband because he managed the finances due to your extravagant spending. It's amazing that you only worry about money. Camilla, you knew all this and still tricked me. If you have that much money, come back home right now. To Mom, family was just a wallet. She never cared about Dad's condition, only about money. And yet, she was careless with bank accounts and thoughtlessly spent on credit cards without any problem. I was astounded at how she managed to live her life this way. Dad, tired of our endless conversation, took over.
I thought you'd listen if it came from our daughter, but no. Thank you for everything. I won't interfere with whatever life you choose to lead. Let's divorce.
Divorce? Wait. What about my life?
You're free from caring for me now. You can live freely. I'll send the divorce papers later. Just sign them.
She really could only think of herself. As I was stunned, Dad ended the call without saying anything more.
I'm sorry, Camilla. I didn't mean to make you go through this.
With just those words from my father. Thank you, Dad. I responded. The next day, we were scheduled to go to the hospital for Dad's appointment.
I never imagined living somewhere so convenient. Thank you, Camilla.
I wanted to make life easier for you, Dad. Plus, compared to New York's high-rises, the prices here are much more reasonable. Looks like we can live comfortably. We left the house having that conversation. It took us about 10 minutes to reach the hospital. As the automatic doors opened, we were taken aback. Sitting near the entrance was my mother, apparently waiting for us since morning. Upon seeing us, she sprang up as if she'd been waiting just for this moment and approached us. What was that call yesterday about? I knew nothing about your salary or you two moving out. I won't allow you two to live in a nice place without me. Suddenly, her hand reached out to grab me. Let me live in the high-rise too. I remained calm despite her behavior, wondering how she could think such demands would be met. It became clear she had never considered our family, and I felt pity. What Dad and I decided is final. Please give up. From now on, I won't think of you as my mother. Thank you for everything until now, but let me live my own life from here. I won't allow it. I don't need your permission. Let go of me. This is a hospital. If you continue, I'll call the police. Mom regained some composure and looked around for the first time. Other patients were staring at us, and hospital staff, accompanied by a security guard, were approaching. Hastily, Mom let go of me. Is everything okay? Without looking at the person who asked, Mom hurriedly left. I apologized for the disturbance. That was my mother. We had a little disagreement. As I looked towards the hospital entrance, I saw my mother's back, seemingly more frail than usual. In the following days, she lingered around the hospital searching for us, but she only acted boldly towards those she perceived as weaker than herself. After being chased away by security and scolded by other patients, she never showed up again. That was the last time I saw her. Later, Dad consulted a lawyer and decided to pursue divorce seriously. Mom resisted the divorce until the end, even demanding compensation. Once the lawyer explained she wasn't entitled to any, she unsuccessfully tried to plead with him. The lawyer coolly referred her to community support centers, proceeding with the paperwork. The divorce was finalized a few months after the incident at the hospital. Dad decided to sell the family home, which he no longer needed. Mom opposed this until she realized she would receive money from the sale, even after the divorce. Her sudden agreement seemed so unlike the mother I knew. Until the end, she remained obsessed with money, leaving us both sighing in disbelief. After Dad sold the family home, we've been enjoying a peaceful life. I've been busy as usual with work, housekeeping, and caregiving, but the care services are much more comprehensive in this area. I've been able to hire a daytime helper and increasingly attend the office. Dad's condition has been slowly progressing, partly due to age. The doctor suggested we consider a care facility, so we're mulling over our options. Just when I got used to this new life, an unknown number called me. Thinking it might be work-related, I answered, only to hear Mom's voice.
Camilla, I've almost run out of savings.
It's only been a few months since she received the money from selling the house, and already her savings were depleting.
So give me some money. Think of it as your final act of filial piety.
I don't have any money to give you anymore. Dad and I are living happily together. Can you please not disturb us anymore?
How dare you call me a disturbance? I'm your mother. You should be grateful and give me some money. Isn't that what working for a good company is for? Show some gratitude to your mother.
I won't contact you anymore. Exhausted from arguing, I hung up, and then blocked her number. Nevertheless, she kept calling from different numbers. My mother, initially aware of the call blocking feature, must have realized that calling from a different phone would connect her through. I kept blocking each new number she called from, but it was a never-ending game of whack-a-mole. Eventually, I changed my number, which finally stopped her calls. Later, through mutual acquaintances, Dad heard about Mom. After running out of savings, she was living in an old apartment in the suburbs, barely making ends meet with a part-time job. With no money for hobbies, she was somehow managing to live alone.
Maybe she's finally learning to live like a person,
Dad said.
I suppose it might be because I've been indulging her.
I muttered softly, sighing deeply as I spoke to Dad. Dad, are you happy now? Dad smiled at me and said,
Of course, Camilla. Thank you. I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused.